There's a moment in history that stays with me, not because of its violence, but because of its quiet strength. A man, bloodied and exhausted, walked through the narrow streets of Jerusalem. On his shoulders, he carried a heavy wooden beam, not for building, but for dying. The crowd around him shouted. Some were angry, some indifferent. But he kept walking. No rage, no bitterness. He didn't fight back. He forgave. He didn't curse his fate. He embraced it. And somehow, in the shadow of death, he gave the world hope. That man, of course, was Jesus, a figure whose story has been told countless times. Whether you see it as spiritual truth or historical event, the way he faced death has moved people across centuries. But here's something less talked about. His courage, his composure, his forgiveness, they weren't just divine traits. They echoed the ancient teachings of Stoic philosophy. Like the Stoic thinkers, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, Jesus showed what it meant to meet pain, injustice, even death, with clarity and grace. So what can we, living in a noisy and uncertain world, learn from that moment on the hill? How does a man, in his final breath, ask for forgiveness for those who hurt him? How can we, ordinary people, find that kind of strength, not just to survive hardship, but to turn it into renewal? In today's video, we're going to explore 5 timeless lessons from the death of Jesus and the wisdom of the Stoics, about courage, forgiveness, and starting over. Because whether you're religious or not, young or old, believer or skeptic, each of us, every day, gets the chance to begin again. 1. The courage to face death. From Stoic philosophers to Christ. There's a quiet kind of bravery that doesn't look like what we see in the movies. No dramatic battle. No grand speeches. Just a man or a woman, facing the end, with open eyes and steady breath. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, was ordered to take his own life. He didn't cry out. He didn't beg. Instead, he invited his friends to witness his final moments and continued to speak calmly about philosophy, even as he slowly bled out after cutting his own wrists. That was his farewell. Socrates, condemned for corrupting the youth, drank the poison hemlock without fear. His final words, a reminder to offer a sacrifice to the gods, as if death were just another kind of journey. And then there's Jesus. Carrying his own cross, surrounded by those who mocked him, he still looked up and said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." He didn't resist. He didn't retaliate. He accepted his fate, not with weakness, but with a kind of strength that makes even the strongest warriors pause. So what does that have to do with us? Most of us won't face a courtroom like Socrates or an execution like Jesus. But we do face things that feel like little deaths. The end of a relationship, the loss of a job, a scary diagnosis, or even just the quiet fear that we haven't lived the life we wanted. In those moments, it's tempting to run, to hide, to deny. But maybe courage isn't about feeling brave. Maybe it's about choosing calm in chaos. Maybe it's about accepting what we can't control and meeting it with dignity. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, imagining hardship in advance, not to live in fear, but to prepare ourselves to build that inner strength before we need it. And Jesus, he didn't just imagine his suffering. He knew it was coming, and he still walked forward. So here's a small but powerful lesson. True strength isn't loud. Sometimes, it's just the quiet decision to keep walking, even when the path is painful. Now, while death is the ultimate test of courage, there's something else that's even harder for many of us. Forgiveness. So let's look at what happens when we choose to let go of anger, and how both Jesus and the Stoics showed us a way forward. Let's move to Lesson 2, the strength in forgiveness. 2. Forgiveness in the face of brutality, a radical Stoic act? Imagine this. You're in pain. You've been wronged. Maybe someone betrayed your trust. Maybe they said something that cut deep or abandoned you when you needed them most. Now imagine, in that exact moment, instead of lashing out or holding on to resentment, you say, "I forgive you." Sounds impossible, doesn't it? Yet that's exactly what Jesus did. As he hung on the cross, beaten, mocked, bleeding, he looked down at the people who had done this to him and said, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." Not after he had time to heal. Not once justice was served. But in the middle of his suffering. in real time. And strangely enough, this aligns with Stoic thinking. The Stoics taught that we should understand others, not condemn them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Whenever someone does wrong, it's because they are mistaken about what is good. Correct their error if you can. Otherwise, let it go." Forgiveness, then, isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's realizing that people act from fear, ignorance, or pain. And holding on to our own anger only prolongs our suffering. Think about your own life. Maybe there's someone you haven't spoken to in years. Maybe there's an apology you'll never get. Maybe you were right, but staying angry is still hurting you more than them. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending what happened was okay. It means choosing peace over poison. It's a radical act of reclaiming your power, not to punish, but to release. Here's a small challenge. Think of one person today you can begin to forgive, even if it's only quietly, in your heart. Even if it's yourself. And now, having explored the strength it takes to forgive, let's look at something else both Jesus and the Stoics understood deeply. The power of pain itself. Not to destroy us, but to shape us. Let's move to Lesson 3, turning suffering into strength. 3. The Roman soldier's gesture, mercy where we least expect it. Sometimes, kindness comes from the last person we expect. As Jesus hung on the cross, his body broken and breath shallow, a Roman soldier, part of the brutal machine that had put him there, did something strange. He took a sponge, soaked it in vinegar wine, and lifted it up to Jesus' lips. For centuries, people saw this as cruelty. Vinegar, while he was suffering. But historians now suggest something else. That vinegar wine, called pasca, was what Roman soldiers themselves drank to quench thirst and prevent illness. It was bitter, yes, but it was all they had. And by offering it to Jesus, the soldier wasn't mocking him, he was showing him a small act of mercy, of shared humanity. Think about that. A soldier, trained to follow orders without question, in a moment of violence, still saw a suffering man and offered comfort. We often forget that even in the darkest systems, there are people, real people, capable of gentleness. And this isn't just an ancient story. Think about today. A stranger in traffic lets you merge when no one else will. A nurse quietly holds your hand before a painful procedure. A coworker who never says much notices you're having a rough day and brings you coffee, no questions asked. It's easy to expect kindness from our loved ones. But when it comes from the unexpected, that's when it really touches something deep inside us. Mercy, no matter how small, can shine brightest in the darkest places. So here's your small reflection. When have you received an unexpected act of kindness? And more importantly, when was the last time you offered it to someone else, even someone who didn't deserve it? Because in the end, mercy isn't always grand. Sometimes, it's just a sponge dipped in vinegar, a reminder that even in brutality, the human heart can still choose softness. And speaking of choosing, let's talk about the power we all have to choose something new, every day. A new direction. A new mindset. A new version of ourselves. Let's move to Lesson 4, the beauty of rebirth, starting again, today. 4. Redemption is always possible. The Stoic and Christian hope. Have you ever woken up wishing you could undo something you said? A moment where you acted out of anger, fear, or pride, and you'd give anything for a second chance? You're not alone. We've all been there. But here's the truth both the Stoics and early Christians understood. No one is beyond redemption. In Stoic philosophy, this idea is rooted in self-mastery. Epictetus reminded us, "You are not your past. You are your decisions now." It doesn't matter what you've done, what matters is what you choose next. And in the Christian tradition, redemption isn't just possible, it's the point. Jesus' death wasn't the end. According to the story, 3 days later, he rose again. That moment, resurrection, is the ultimate symbol of a clean slate. A new beginning. Not just for him, but for everyone. Both perspectives agree. You're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to fall. And more importantly, you're allowed to get back up. Think about this in real life. Maybe you lost someone's trust. Maybe you failed a job, a relationship, or even yourself. Redemption doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It means taking responsibility and then doing better. Like the recovering addict who now mentors others. Like the once absent parent who becomes a constant source of love. Like the prisoner who finds peace in books, in prayer, in service, and begins again. Redemption isn't reserved for saints. It's for all of us, ordinary people trying again. So today, ask yourself, what part of you needs a second chance? What story are you telling yourself about your worth, and is it time to rewrite it? Because every day, the sun rises again. And so can we. And speaking of rising again, how do we actually begin that process? How do we stop waiting for someday and start showing up as our best self right now? Let's step into our final reflection. 5. The power of choosing good. Today. 5. A new day, a new you. Choosing to be good today. It's easy to put off becoming the person we want to be. We say, I'll start being more patient tomorrow. I'll finally take care of my health next week. I'll fix that relationship someday. But someday is a moving target. Today is the only thing we ever really have. Marcus Aurelius, writing to himself in his journal, not for an audience, just for his own soul, once reminded himself, don't waste time arguing what a good person should be. Be one. It's simple, but not always easy. Choosing to be good doesn't mean being perfect. It means doing the next right thing. Even when no one's watching. Even when it's inconvenient. Think about your own life. Maybe you're exhausted from work, but you still make time to read to your child at bedtime. Maybe you're frustrated with someone, but you choose not to respond with anger. Maybe you've been distant, but today, you send that message, make that call, take that step. Goodness isn't one big decision. It's a series of small, quiet choices. And every morning, no matter what happened yesterday, we get to choose again. That's what makes each sunrise sacred. Not because everything is magically different, but because we can decide to be different. To show up. To forgive. To start again. To live by our values, not just think about them. So what will you choose today? Not next year. Not after you've figured it all out. Today. This morning. This breath. Now, as we come to the end of this reflection, let's take one last moment, not just to think, but to feel. Let's return to where we started. A man walking toward death, not with hate, but with love. Not for himself, but for others. Let's close with one quiet but powerful truth, the kind that lives in both history and your heart. Let's talk about it, in our final thoughts. Final thoughts. Not long ago, I met a man in his 70s. He had made a lot of mistakes in his youth, hurt people, burned bridges, lost time. But in the last decade, he'd quietly dedicated his life to service. Volunteering at a shelter. Writing letters of apology. Being the kind of father and friend he wished he had been earlier. He told me something I'll never forget. I can't change the beginning of my story, but I can still choose how it ends. And that's what days like this remind us. Whether you believe in Jesus' resurrection as a divine miracle, or simply as a powerful symbol, the message is the same. You can rise again. You can begin again. You are not finished yet. The Stoics and the early Christians didn't agree on everything. But on this, on redemption, on purpose, on choosing goodness today, they walked the same road. So take a breath. Let go of who you were yesterday. Step into who you choose to be today. It's a new day. Let it be the beginning of a new you. And if this message meant something to you, if it gave you even a moment of clarity, or peace, or motivation, I'd love for you to like this video and subscribe. We have more reflections coming, stories from the Stoics, lessons from history, insights for everyday life. And I'd be honored to share them with you. Until then, be well. And remember, you're never too far gone to come home to yourself.